Hello, Divorce and Beyond family. I've got some exciting news because we have teamed up with Headspace to guide you toward better mental health. With Headspace's meditation, mindfulness tools, and mental health support, you're set for a journey to a happier, healthier you. And there's more because if you sign up through our exclusive link, you'll enjoy 2 weeks of Headspace membership for free. So don't miss out on this opportunity to embrace your well-being. You can check out the show notes for the link or just go to divorcebeyond.com/headspace-Susan. And you'll be able to start your path to peace and joy today. This is just one more way that we can support you on your journey to a better beyond.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
The stats don't lie. You know, Joan Mayer's study that we talk about all the time, she's a George Washington University law professor who showed empirically in divorce and custody cases that women are believed less than half the time when they report, various kinds of abuse. It's not an anomaly. These stories are not just, oh, it was a bad situation. That doesn't usually happen. This is happening repeatedly.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and listeners, today is a special day because I have not one but two of your favorite guests joining me again. And it's a very special project, or passion project, should I say, that they are here to discuss with us. So I'm welcoming back both Dr. Christine Cocchiola, Dr. Christine, and Amy Polacko. I hate to say it, Amy, but Pitbull Polacko is back in the house. You know, I can't help myself. I love to call her that. She truly is a pit bull when it comes to her investigative journalism. And that's really why the ladies are here today. You know Dr. Christine as a clinician, as an advocate. She is dedicated to supporting victims of coercive control, and she has been focused on the systemic issues within the family court system for quite some time. She had some of our top episodes ever focused on issues of domestic abuse, coercive control, post-separation abuse. In fact, we recently replayed 2 of those on the podcast as special from the archive editions. I'll link to those for you all. And Amy, as I mentioned, is an investigative journalist and divorce coach. She champions the cause of women navigating family court challenges, and her investigative work exposes injustices and systemic failures in family courts. And those two shared paths have brought them together to bring a new book to the world, one that I will tell you as a practitioner in the family court system for decades now, I can tell you has been needed for a very long time. Their new book is called Framed: Women in the Family Court Underworld. And if that sounds a little dark and a little dire, it's because the issues that they're working on to expose are a little dark and they are a little dire. So we are going to talk about and dive into the book, which reveals the chilling realities that are faced by many women as they enter into the family court system. And I've said it before, the family court system does, I will say, its best within a system that is extremely flawed at its core. And so although I can say those of us who have worked in the system do our best, we're working within something, a construct that just doesn't work, that doesn't have what it needs to work. So they have written this book. It is in pre-sale now. Let me just tell you all immediately before the end of this episode, go to narcfreepress.com. You can pre-order the book there now. Ladies, I'm excited to say it's already a bestseller in pre-order, but go and pre-order it because that is the best thing that you can do as listeners in order to help the book get the voice and the listen that it needs, the readers that it needs. So please do that. But let me thank you both for being here today to talk about this, but also for being the two people who came together to shine this light. So thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you so much for having us, Susan.
Well, I told you just before we got started, anything you ever need, you are Divorce and Beyond VIP experts. My listeners love the work that you do, and they love it when you come on the show because you give them things that they can absorb. You put information, really valuable information in a format they can understand, and then you give them real actionable tools and takeaways that can help make their journey better. And the book takes that to the next level, right? The book is, you've given an example or more than one example, but you explain the issues with the court system, especially for women, and the difficulties that they face in ways that make them very accessible, very understandable. And then the book goes further. But let's start with why the two of you came together to write this book.
Well, I think in both of our practices, we hear these stories every single day and they hit our hearts. You would think that nothing would shock us anymore, but they do. And we will call each other, and we have called each other and said, can you believe this? And we both knew we wanted to get them out there in this world. I mean, we should say that we've changed the women's names, so they are anonymous, but there really were 3 reasons that we wanted to write Framed. One, to validate for the women out there. We know there are millions around the world going through this. You're not alone. You're not crazy, despite what someone may be saying about you. 2, we want to educate and warn women. And that's why we say this book is for women dating, women who are married, maybe even happily married. How do you protect yourself just in case? And then last but not least, we have a whole call to action section. We hope that people get ticked off reading this book. We hope it touches them in their hearts and they say, what can I do? And we have a roadmap of what you can do and become involved at the grassroots level, because at our core, we are dreamers, and our goal is to create a huge social justice movement. And we hope this book is even just a small part of that.
Yeah. And Christine, both of you are survivors yourself, right? That is how you perhaps have come to this space. No one knows better than a survivor what the experience of being a victim of abuse is like. And so you both have been very eloquent and incredibly prolific in your support of women going through this process. But the book really does take this further than that. In the space of sharing the stories of the women that you speak to. And I'm just wondering, is there a story that really was sort of the one that flipped the switch for you, that let you know that this needed to be shared with the world?
Well, I would say that we had already started this process, but in the fall, I heard from a mom who had a 16-year-old. The story just gives me goosebumps. I mean, they're all horrible and horrifying, but she had a 16-year-old who at 14 said, Mom, I just don't want to go anymore to his house. I'm not comfortable with him. He's been an abuser. The dynamics were always there. And this is what I think happens in the court system, is that the court system doesn't always understand. And you know, Susan, I did a podcast with you called The Anatomy of the Abuser. Right. Because the court system doesn't always understand how these abusers show up. And so this 14-year-old expressed a desire not to be with her dad. And it took 2 years of court for mom to get to the point where they actually had the hearing where the child was able to disclose she didn't want to see dad. And in that hearing, the judge flipped custody to the dad. The mom was allowed 48 hours a week with her child, and the rest of the time was with dad. The judge did the exact opposite of what the child was imploring the court to do. And she was 14 when it started. She was 16 at the hearing. And the child refused to go, and the judge put her in jail. At 16 years old, she went to jail. And so, like, a lot of people think, oh, women make up these stories. Or how could this really be true? How bad could it be? Or in the case of me, and I know, I don't want to speak for Amy, but certainly I've been doing this work since the age of 19. I educate on this topic every single semester to college social work students, looking at the power and control wheel. I didn't know it was happening to me because it wasn't physically violent. It doesn't mean abusers won't become physically violent, but the court is always looking through this violent incident model. And even if there is physical violence, they say, oh, that was a while ago, or he's not abusive anymore, or maybe, he can get healthy. And the reality is with the anatomy of the abuser, usually they can't. And so how do we have such injustice going on where a child who's 16 doesn't have a voice? Never mind the 8-year-old, never mind the mother who is clearly just trying to protect her children. And so, yeah, it's kind of really scary out there. And I say this is an epidemic, and I know Amy agrees. 35% of women will suffer violence in their lifetime. What of the cases that aren't violent? How many are there more of? It's truly scary. And we are so grateful to the 22 protective mothers who shared their stories with us, who entrusted us with their stories. I mean, this book wouldn't have come to fruition without them.
Right. I mean, first off, I have to say that story is horrifying, right? On how that could happen as a legal professional, as an attorney. I'm not even seeing sort of the legal basis for that, but it's a fact that the case happened. And I think that it's really important for people to understand that these aren't one-offs. I mean, you just mentioned that there are 22 stories that you tell, 22 real life cases, although you've changed the names to literally protect the innocent, right? In these cases, that this does happen all the time in our family courts. And I know, Amy, there have been cases that, I am assuming most of these cases are the ones that you have heard through, helping and supporting those who are going through the process. How did you find the stories of the participants?
Some of them were some of our clients who we know, and some were not. Some were, look, after I did the story on Catherine Kasanoff, I probably got 1,000 emails from people with stories that we say there are 22 stories in frame. There could have been 2,200 or more, really. And I want to talk to what you were just saying, Susan. The stats don't lie. Joan Mayer's study that we talk about all the time, she's a George Washington University law professor who showed empirically in divorce and custody cases that women are believed less than half the time when they report, various kinds of abuse. And when mothers are reporting a father's abuse, which is sexual abuse, they're believed only 15% of the time. It's not an anomaly. These stories are not just, it was a bad situation. That doesn't usually happen. This is happening repeatedly.
Well, and, you mentioned Catherine Kasanoff, and although you have been on the show several times, I don't think we've really explained her story, although it's certainly been on our social media and we've talked about it. I know you've written extensively on it. So I think it would be helpful if you told Catherine's story or gave a little overview of what happened in that tragic.
Sure. So I was first introduced to her in 2021. I did the first story on her case for Ms. Magazine. She had lost custody of her 3 girls, and it was a story called Empty Home for the Holidays. It was about her and another mother who was in Connecticut. And that's how I became acquainted with her story. There was an allegation of abuse by one of her daughters against her husband. And as a result, he filed for divorce and he had an ex parte or emergency hearing, which we hear about all the time, where he was granted custody of the girls. And it was supposed to be temporary, but this happened over and over again, where these temporary orders then become permanent. And there was a narrative in the court system at that time that Catherine was unstable and unhinged and crazy and a danger to her daughters. And it was very hard for her to dismantle that. It's worth noting she was a bright legal mind. She was a counsel for Governor Kathy Hochul in New York State. And if she couldn't go up against this, who could? So she had evaluators removed. She had many wins in her case. But ultimately, after years, 3+ years of this battle where she did not see her girls for extended periods of time, she finally got unsupervised visits. And then a new evaluator came. She said rubber stamped an old report. And it really was a final straw for her. And I can say that because the executor of her estate, Wayne Baker, and her good friend confirms this. She decided to take her own life in an assisted suicide in Switzerland in May of 2023. And her story hit, a lot of national news outlets, including Ms. I wrote several follow-up stories on that. And the story after her death was the most read story in Ms. Magazine of 2023, which I think says a lot about how poignant her story was, because that was a year of huge abortion coverage, right? So some of us thought, wow, this case could be a watershed, but then it wasn't. We talk about Catherine's case a little bit. I do in the intro to Framed, but I think it was one of the reasons we wrote the book, right? Dr. Christine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's important to highlight. So Catherine was physically ill. Mm-hmm. I mean, she had cancer several times, and this is why she decided to, embark on assisted suicide. But of course, with that was this devastation, the heartbreak that happens when your children are literally stolen from you. And, knowing that trauma that is happening all the time with protective mothers who do show up in court looking pretty good. And then what about the moms who don't? Because they are so dysregulated and overwhelmed, and it's held against them. And I think it's important to highlight one of our stories in particular. There's a lot of moms who tried to hold the courts responsible, but one particular mom tried to hold the court responsible. And in her state, the magistrate had basically robbed her of custody for no reason, given it to the abuser. And she tried to hold the magistrate accountable. And you probably know, Susan, in some states, I guess the magistrate actually is the liaison to the judge, right? And what the judge did in that is he retaliated. And so one of the things we don't talk enough about is that, when we write about it in this particular story, I can actually just read a quick paragraph for you. Lest you think this seems implausible, it is not. There is judicial immunity for judges. These occurrences happen day after day in family court. It shields judges from civil liability for judicial acts. It's back to a 1607 English case. It's broad and it covers judicial acts as long as you've done judicial acts and that are not undertaken in clear absence of all jurisdiction. Assuming a judge does not run afoul of these two conditions, a judge cannot be civilly liable even if they've acted maliciously or corruptly. So when moms try to hold accountability, so back to Catherine's story, she tried to hold them accountable. And when she did that, it came back 100-fold onto her, where they went back to an old report that did not have value. And so that's the frightening part of all of this. And, we talked about, I think in the preface, we also mentioned a quote, where I talk about Dr. Evan Stark's, this is like carpenter ants devouring the foundation of a house. You don't even know what's happening until it's too late. And, this post-separation legal abuse that happens to all of these protective mothers over and over. And we're not saying it doesn't happen to men, by the way. And to the point, we want men on this team too. If you love women, you have to understand there's a gendered oppression going on. And again, we write about that in the preface, this idea that this is a problem that permeates all of society. No one is immune. No one is immune. And so we all need to level up a little bit. And to Amy's point, if Catherine's story didn't create a watershed, we're trying hard, though. We're hoping the book creates a watershed of some sort.
Well, which is one of the, reasons why at the top I said, this has been such a needed, hopefully, bridge for people, because I think what you're able to do in this book that is so hard for people is put it into a format where people can understand just the stories that you're telling in this shortened version. You're paraphrasing what you're able to put into over 300 pages in the book. It gives people a real sense of what it is that you are actually talking about. And Dr. Christine, I'm so glad you brought up, the immunity issue. It's certainly been in the news a lot lately, right? With presidential immunity coming before our Supreme Court. And, wherever you fall on that, I think, the fact that a president can order, basically under the new ruling, can order the assassination of someone that they don't like while in office should give everyone a little bit of pause. And as you say, it's a fine balance. I will tell you, in the family law system of those of us who operate, family law attorneys who practice there, judges who sit on the bench there, I think we're the most grieved group of professionals that there are in the family court system, right? Because, there's no issue that brings about more emotion and higher emotion for people than their families, their money, their children, and that. So although I will say, knock on wood, I have never been grieved, but as a profession, we are grieved quite often. And so that's where the judicial immunity comes from. But has it been taken too far? Has it been, you have to have curbs on ultimate power. We're dealing with that with the Supreme Court right now, right? So asking for reforms. Hey, listeners. Are you navigating the tough waters of divorce and feeling overwhelmed by the process? Let me introduce you to Hello Divorce, your ultimate ally in making this journey smoother and less stressful. Hello Divorce offers a modern, affordable approach to divorce, combining expert legal advice with easy-to-use online tools. So whether you need help with paperwork, mediation, or simply some guidance, Hello Divorce has you covered. Plus, their flat fee services mean no hidden costs, just clear upfront pricing. Visit hellodivorce.com today to learn more and take the first step toward your fresh start. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. Hello Divorce is here to help. Stay tuned for more from Dr. Christine Cocchiola and Amy Polacko as they continue our talk about their brand new book, Framed: Women in the Family Court Underworld. The book is available right now for pre-order, so to get your copy of their bestseller, visit narcfreepress.com.
They are not who we think they are. They hoodwinked Amy and I and all of our other mothers because they show up as decent human beings. And so we really need people to be educated on the anatomy of who these individuals are, how they show up. And we need to basically, I say, infiltrate the system and create more trained individuals on coercive control who understand how these people show up.
If you are finding this episode helpful and you want more from Dr. Christine and Amy, visit the show notes to get links to their prior appearances on Divorce and Beyond. They are two of your favorite Divorce and Beyond experts for a reason.
And now we return to today's show.
You've talked about at a high level given examples of what the failings are. But what exactly is going wrong? If you could put your finger on it, where is the court system failing? If I can put you on the spot, what are they doing wrong?
I think that there is a deep systemic misogyny. And I think it was shocking for all of us. I know I grew up thinking women could do whatever they wanted in this world. There might be a glass ceiling we hear about. But I think when you enter the family court system, as many of us do, hey, Angelina Jolie has said this too, right? When you see what goes on there, it's the twilight zone. it is an upside down world. And when you look at what is the common thread in many of these cases, it is a predisposition to question the woman, right? To think she's a liar, to think she's hell-bent on revenge, a woman scorned. I've had law clerks tell me their judges said that to them. Their family court judges said, hey, she's angry because he moved on, before they even heard the case. So we see this over and over again. And then to Dr. Christine's point about the custody, as we know, courts are supposed to look at the best interests of the child, and this belief that 50-50 shared custody is the best no matter what, that is overriding these huge red flags of abuse. So even if a child says they were sexually abused by a parent, the court is saying, they should still be 50-50. And men's rights movement that's been going on in our country for decades. And so that is playing a huge, huge part in this.
And Susan, to dovetail on that, I think what we're really talking about is coercive control, right? And so coercive control is the desire, the need to exert power and control over another, or it can be groups of people or individuals. I see coercive control as the foundation of every single effing abuse in the world. Think about racism, sexism. Think about groups of people being oppressed. Think about horrific circumstances worldwide occurring, right? And it's about power, and that can be in money and fame, certainly. But if I can't retain control of you, then I'm going to exert control in other ways. And I'm going to use the legal system, and I'm going to weaponize the children. What we have to recognize is that there are a lot of individuals who are characterologically disordered, that they are willing to exert power and control in a way that is so harmful because they don't care, literally do not care about the welfare or the well-being of other people. They are only concerned about exerting power and control. What we should mention is this book has references. We have a whole list of academic research compiled to prove our points. There are many studies that prove that the family court system is set up in a hierarchy. The judges actually truly, when interviewed, believe that they have judicial prowess, that they have the ability to make these decisions over others because they have that power, for lack of a better word. So I kind of believe, and I don't mean to be so negative, I know there's good cases. I know there's good attorneys. I know there's good family court judges. I know that. But the problem is overwhelmingly, like Amy said, there is misogyny that is permeating the system. And if I do not have the regard, who the heck chooses to be a family court judge? I mean, you could tell me, but who chooses that, right? And do they ever take a course on, and I'm going to use the wrong word, domestic violence? No, they don't have to. And frankly, domestic violence is the wrong course. The course has to be about the anatomy of the abuser, because these people show up as charlatans. They are not who we think they are. They hoodwinked Amy and I and all of our other mothers because they show up as decent human beings. Now add in that I'm a family court judge who already has, because of the way the world is set up, this ideology about women in general, that they maybe manipulate a little bit, that they're scorned, like Amy said, that maybe they just don't want the other parent involved. Well, let's take a minute here, because from a clinical perspective, all we have to do is look at the foundation of that relationship, the foundation of the relationship. I go back to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And some people don't agree with me, but the bottom line, and I was one of 10 people on her amicus brief appeal in the world because I said this is coercive control. That's what's going on here. And there was a complicitness going on that framed her in a way that looked like she was unstable. And so we really need people to be educated on the anatomy of who these individuals are, how they show up. And we need to basically, I say, infiltrate the system and create more trained individuals on coercive control who understand how these people show up. But until we do that, we're swimming upstream.
Man, you just like summed that up so well that we could just put that. Well, I know you've testified at various legislative bodies. I would say you can just send that soundbite when you have to go testify from now on, because I think that was extremely persuasive. Amy, did you have something you wanted to add?
There's also a societal construct, right? When people look at divorce and these situations, they label it a messy divorce. They label it Jerry Springer, right? We know that court professionals do. We know that regular people off the street we could interview would say that, oh, there's two sides to every story, when usually there's an abuser and there is a victim. So what we set out to do in Framed is to humanize these women. You can't label this a messy divorce until you know what really happened. And I think one of the most fascinating parts of the stories is we said to our contributors, tell us how it began. Because I think the court officials can often think, it's your problem. You married him. You picked him. Now you got to lay in this bed, right? And they don't really understand that abusers don't present as the evil guy. They present the good guy. It's very insidious. It is not physical often. And so when people read these stories, we really hope that they empathize, that they see themselves in this and see, you know what? I could have fallen for him too. This could have happened to me too. Or I want to prevent this from happening to me or my daughter or my sister or my mother or my friend I care about.
Yeah, I think that's super important. It may not have happened to you. It could still happen to you or someone you care about. Certainly in my own way, had my own dealings with an abuser in my life. And, I consider myself a fairly well-educated and intelligent woman who, by the way, worked in the family court legal system. So you would think that I would know, but we all can fall victim to this. And victim is the correct word. The problem is, I can say from at least my experience of having worked there in this process, is that there is very much that sort of preordained or predestined thought that this is a woman scorned. This is a hysterical reaction to this divorce process. This is a attempt to maintain control by the woman over the children. The children are her weapon, so therefore she wants to maintain it. And in fact, I've heard judges say that when they hear allegations of abuse, they take them with a grain of salt, because in their experience, whether, I'm not sure how they define this, but in their experience, that allegation is used as a weapon more often than it's true. And I don't know where they're coming up with that statistic, right, of what's true and what's not true. Because the other thing that we know with this, and I think you both experienced this, is how hard it is to prove the abuse, because they're predestined or preformed in their mind that it's not an abuse case. Dr. Christine.
Yeah, and I would say that is so true, but I really don't think it's rocket science. I don't. I think that if you look at the parental subsystem, using a little clinical words here, but if you look at the parental subsystem and how it formed, and you're able to see if one person had more power and control over another throughout the relationship. I mean, it's not hard to discern who's the victim and who's the perpetrator. It doesn't mean the victim has always been on good behavior, because we know what happens when you're trapped over and over again. You're going to behave, quote unquote, badly. But I was on a call recently. I actually consult with clinicians who are asking these questions. Is this an abusive relationship? Well, you've been working with a couple for 3 years. Okay, red flag number one. If you've been working with them for 3 years and things haven't gotten better, then maybe it is an abusive relationship. But how do we look at that relationship and ask ourselves, who would she be outside of that relationship? Would she be dysregulated? Would she be trying to retain control in her environment, making sure that he's home at the time he said he's going to come home? Would she be doing all of those things if the relationship dynamics were healthy? And when you begin to separate it and you look at the relationship and you look at each individual identified outside of the relationship, you're able to hone in on who the person is that's abusive. Now, abuse is a spectrum. Not everybody's a 10. You know what I mean? But the reality is, and what we know, and I actually recently spoke with Dr. Ramani, and she agrees that the protective mothers that I support and coach are people who are dealing with the 8, 9s, and 10s on the spectrum of narcissistic behaviors, narcissistic abuse. And in the book, Amy and I call these people coercive controller narcissistic abusers because they all are coercing and controlling. But narcissistic abuse resonates with people. They all of a sudden are able to say, this is what I'm experiencing. We know we don't bring that term into court. We definitely don't bring that terminology into court. But the reality is Lisa Fontes and I co-authored a couple of articles. One is it's not high conflict, because it's not. Abusers are drawn towards conflict. If you look at the dynamics in the relationship, who's going back to court over and over again? Or if one person is it because that person is trying to protect the children? Is it because that person's trying to get what's equitably theirs for child custody, for child support, right? And also knowing that it's not, we need to call it post-separation abuse. Coercive control intensifies post-separation. And so understanding that that's exactly what's going on in these situations. And again, we have the research that proves it. So come on, judicial, we need the judicial community to recognize that this is actually occurring, and it could be their daughter. And maybe that's what needs to happen, sadly, is we need more people living in the system to actually have their children experiencing this, their sister experiencing this, their wife who maybe divorced someone experiencing this.
Certainly, judicial and court personnel education is part of what's needed here, which is systemic. It's needed across the board. But I find it really interesting that you just said you work with clinicians who are asking, is this an abusive relationship? They're clinicians. Shouldn't they know whether it's an abusive relationship? So is it a broader problem?
It's a huge problem, because ask yourself, of all the women that you know who have experienced this and they told their story, didn't people say, really? Was it that bad? We do this all the time to victims. We ask, why did you stay? Not why did he abuse, right? And certainly, I think these abusers show up with a facade. They hoodwink everyone. They're gaslighting everyone in the system, including custody evaluators, including the guardian ad litem, including therapists, over and over again. Don't even get me started on therapists and repair therapy, because I will go bonkers. We can have that in conversation another time. So,
I hear another episode coming. Well, and I think that's fascinating, right? Because you are thinking that if you're going to a therapist, the therapist knows all of this. And is there that idea that, we're in therapy, we've been going for 3 years, it hasn't changed, so maybe it is an abuse, or they haven't called it that. Because,
but there's no bruise. There's no, right? If there's no bruise, then that's what happens. And even when there is bruising, we minimize it. We think these people can get healthy.
Yeah. Or they can change.
Well, and
I have to say my lawyer hat comes on, my lawyer brain starts kicking in here. And I'm thinking, the way that you go at this in a courtroom is courtrooms are based upon proof and evidence, right? That's what we thrive on in that system. Is it the proper system to deal with family issues? I've always said it is not. It's for dealing with car accidents and breached contracts, but it is what we deal with. And so my brain is saying, well, if you're experiencing this, you bring a therapist, a mental health professional in to describe to the judge as an expert what's happening here, so the judge can understand, because that's another way we educate our jurists. We bring our experts in. But if the experts don't know, then there's a systemic flaw there as well that is actually truly negatively impactful on the process, because the way we could actually go at this in the moment would be to bring the experts in to testify. But if you don't even have the experts available to do that with enough of an education to be able to do it well, to educate our jurists, because it's not just sending judges to a class where they sit there for a few hours and hear a lecture on what coercive control is. That is helpful. I'm not saying that's not a great idea.
We need the whole system to change. And that's why I created a clinician, attorney, and coach training that's literally 10 hours long for coaches and attorneys, so that they learn all of the facets of coercive control, because as I said earlier, we need to infiltrate the system. So
and you're not available to testify in every single case that's going on, right? So, and tell us a little bit more about your course, just because I do have a lot of the people listening are people going through divorce, but I also have a lot of professionals who listen. So tell them about the course.
I have a clinician, attorney, and coach training. The attorneys and coaches can stay for 10 hours. Clinicians stay for 14. It's 14 CEs. 14 CEs available if you're a social worker or someone in the clinical mental health field. And it's, again, soup to nuts, everything about coercive control, how the family court system engages in that process unknowingly sometimes, right? And also, what do abusers look like, and what do victims look like? And then what are the best practices to support victims and survivors?
It's the place to start. It's if you're out there and you are a practitioner in any of the various categories, it is the place to start. And for those who are listening, I would say that the place to start is pre-ordering the book, getting your copy of the book, reading the book. What other last thoughts would you like to leave listeners with on this topic? I know, again, I've mentioned the book is over 300 pages. It is jam-packed full of validation, education, and warning and call to action. But what would you like to say to listeners?
I think we want people to know that this is a diverse snapshot of women, and from 4 countries. I don't think we've mentioned yet: the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. So this is not just a US problem. And, as you were talking about experts, we have one story called Research Means Nothing, right? There are different elements of each story that, I think will strike people. And we have said many times, it's not a beach read. We're going to be honest with you, but it is a must read. And we hope that every one of you doesn't just pre-order for yourself, but think about someone who needs to read this book. Do you have a daughter? Do you know someone who works in this field? Is a friend of yours out there in the dating world? Is someone about to get married? Is someone maybe in a marriage that, you sense there are some things going on? I think these are all cautionary tales for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good question. Will the book be available in Audible form? Because I know a lot of times the hard copy is difficult for someone to have around the home if they are in a difficult relationship.
Yes, we do have plans to do an Audible version in the upcoming months, so we will keep you posted on that.
Wonderful.
And I think it's important to mention, too, that Amy has an amazing course called Divorce. Amy, your course, do you want to share a little bit about your course?
Yes, Susan had me on talking about it. And so for those listeners who are thinking about divorce or in the divorce process, I started a course called Divorce Decoded: Your Path to Freedom because of family court. I felt that no one warned me. No one told me the ground rules. Don't do this, do this. This is the landscape. And I think that women need to know this going in. So it's literally the cost of 1 hour with an attorney, much less than that, probably, depending what area you're in. And it's really the Cliff Notes on divorce. So that was a passion project for me, too.
And if people purchase the book, we are doing quite a few the Abuser's Playbook. It says it right on the bottom of our book, the Abuser's Playbook, because we're doing some workshops to actually give people some hints and clues about really prepping yourself and understanding how these abusers do have a playbook. And if you purchase the book, then you can come to the workshop for free.
So go to narcfreepress.com and you can pre-order the book there, and then you'll be able to, I'm assuming on the website you also have a list of the workshops so that people can join. Here's something that all 3 of us in this podcast speaking here know, is that when you are in this space, you do feel alone, you feel like no one understands, and you are desperate for help, but can't find it. And I will tell you, start with the book, start with these two ladies, go to both of their individual websites as well as the book's website, because that is where you'll start to find help. And I'm going to ask you both to give your websites and contact information as well, if you don't mind, just because I would love people to know where to go to find you both. Amy? My
website is freedomwarrior.info, and my Instagram is at Freedom Warrior Tribe. And one thing, and I also run a support group on Facebook called Strong Savvy Women, which is free and you're welcome to come to. One thing we didn't mention, we'd love for you to go on Goodreads and leave us a review. And, you know, that's one place during pre-order we can get reviews. So if you click, you want to read this book or you feel comfortable reviewing it, some people have already, we really appreciate that.
I'll be doing that right after this episode. And Dr. Christine, your website.
Yeah, Coercive Control Consulting. And I also just lots of free content on my Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere, where I try to guide protective parents on how to deal with their children's experiences of being coercively controlled in these family systems.
Yeah, well, and you have a podcast as well.
Perfect Prey. Yes, it's called Perfect Prey because I believe that children are the ideal prey for perpetrators, but certainly so are adult victims who end up in these relationships, never their fault.
So if you're a protective parent, that is another excellent place to start and find resources. So ladies, you know, let me end with just a thank you, a sincere thank you to you both for the work that you do and the work that you did in pulling this all together in the book. I know this is a labor of love and passion for both of you, but I also know how much work went into it and will continue to go into it. And although it has been a lot of work, I expect it's probably going to be a launch pad and just the beginning of a movement. So I thank you both on behalf of those of us in the legal world who have seen the struggle and those people out there in the world who are struggling with this. So thank you both. And thank you for coming back on.
For being a beacon. I mean, honestly, your light just shines so bright in this world of educating people on these experiences. Thank you.
We're grateful and we hope you're right.
Me too. So go pre-order the book, everybody, or order it depending on when you're listening to this, but go to narcfreepress.com or the show notes. Of course, I'm going to have a link for them. And, you know, reach out if you are not alone. Reach out, get help, find the resources. These two women are the place to start. Thank you both. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.